Welcome back to Roller Coaster. Today we're going to be doing a massive list of 70 superb Schwarzkopfs. Now, there isn't exactly 70 coasters on this list. It's kind of like there's so many Schwarzkopfs, so many clones. All lists kind of close to 70, but 70 is a really cool number. That makes a really great alliteration with Schwarzkopfs and superb, which I added in there because I did Radical Arabs, which wasn't even an alliteration. But anyway, let's move on. First coaster that Schwarzkopf ever made was Deuce and Spiral. Opened all the way back in 1959, and so it was traveling then, but it actually operated at the good old Wiener Prater out in Vienna, Austria, for 4 years out there. So that's pretty cool. Very, very little sort of ride. Kind of reminds me of like a mini version of like a enclosed Jetstar type looking thing with that really mini spiral lift hill. Very interesting first coaster for Schwarzkopf to start off with, but let's move on to the Wildcats. This came next after Deuce and the Spiral. They opened a whole bunch of these. You had Radar at Gronelund, and from there it just kept going on. You had 3 different models: the 45 meter, 54 meter, and 65 meter. That isn't the length of the track or the height, obviously. That is the dimensions of the ride. So like it's 45 meters long, like the actual length of the dimensions of the ride, width and length, all that good stuff. And as you can see, I listed a bunch of parks that have had them. And on the left there, I listed all the parks, the first parks to get each type of model. So that's pretty cool. Cool. All right, moving on. We got the Jetstar 1 coasters. There's a whole bunch of these. I listed 3 of the most notable ones, I guess. We got one that's still operating that wasn't even listed here. It was Tiger Coaster at Indiana Beach. That is the only Jetstar 1 currently operating in North America. But you also had Jetstar at Catano Pier that closed in 2000. They had a Jetstar 1 at Parc d'Attractions de Madrid, which now is home to like the Intimate Invert and all other good stuff. And Wiener Prater, of course, had a Jetstar 1 called Cortina Bob, so that's pretty cool. And then after that came the City Jet models, or the Jet 400 models, as they're called on RCDB. You've got the first ones really opened over on the New Jersey shore. We had some at Jolly Roger, which I'm pretty sure is in Maryland, actually. I'm pretty sure. There was one at Jolly Roger and at Maurice Piers. And also, the interesting one that moved around a lot was the one at Drayton Manor. Jumbo Jet opened for 2 years. Then that was in storage for a little while, moved to Negoland, and then this year it's opening at Parc de la Vallée near Paris. So that is a cool little thing, moving around and still operating great. About 30 years, I don't know how many years, a lot of years after, 40 years after it opened. So cool stuff. Moving on, we've got the Speed Racer clones, or the extended jumbo jets. The first one was Big Bend at Six Flags Over Texas, that only operated for 8 years, and then it closed forever. So that kind of sucked, but there was also good old Zambezi Zinger at Worlds of Fun, which everybody's heard of, and it's still operating today down in Colombia at Parc del Cafe, the same park as that one Eurofighter, as Montaña Rusa, the Spanish name for a roller coaster. There's also, of course, everybody knows about the Whizzer clones. Sorry, not the Wizard, because that would make me GP, wouldn't it? Very funny. Whizzer at Six Flags Great America, that's still operating very well. And people don't know it, but Whizzer at it's California's Great America. They had one there, the same type of coaster, same clone, everything, but it closed after only 12 years of operating, so that's kind of a bummer. But very cool stuff. Let's move on to the next clone, the Jetstar 3, or the Jumbo Jet clones. The first one was at Cedar Point, actually opened in 72, and it moved around a whole bunch of times in the past 40 plus years. And now it's at some Eastern European park, and has the same name, so that's great. But it's like a blue color scheme, I'm pretty sure. Pretty interesting there. We also had a very interesting name of Glissade, which was operating at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, and then there's one at La Feria Chapultepec, the same park as Quimera, and that massive 8,000 foot long racing coaster. But now it's at Selva Magica, which is also in Mexico, as Tornado. So that's pretty cool. That's pictured there on the right, the green coaster. And I listed there a whole bunch of the other Jetstar 3 coasters, which a lot of them aren't operating anymore, which is unfortunate. But anyway, moving on. We've got the Jetstar 2 coasters, which are probably the most prolific of all of them. We had the interesting name of Super Big Gulp at Playland, as in the Playland in Vancouver, which is home to the iconic, not really that iconic, but the awesome coaster, the wooden coaster at Playland, obviously, the awesome Buzz Bar, insane, #1 bucket list coaster. There's also one that it operated for a year at some, pretty sure it was a Portland park. I think that's Riverfront Park. And then there's one, it's still operating today as Jetstar 2, the same name as the model at Lagoon. So that's pretty cool. I hear it's actually a pretty intense ride, so that's also very cool. Black Hole at Alton Towers, which had a very interesting history. I'm pretty sure Defunctland did a segment on Black Hole. Very interesting ride history. And now it moved to Furuvik as Rocket, which I'm pretty sure is in Sweden. Yes, cool stuff. Moving on, we've got the first, the first in a long time, single coaster that is not a clone, Geberg's Bahn at Fantasia, which was recently on one of the best coaster of the year episodes, where it did not win the best coaster in 1975 because we had Raguel in the same year. But this is still a pretty cool looking custom Schwarzkopf mine train with that figure 8 layout and that awesome cool scaffolding type stuff. I don't even know what to call that, but I'm bad at theming. I don't really like theming, but anyway, this is still a very cool looking ride, very interesting. There's I think pretty sure Ride Review has a point of view of this. Those are the Swedish guys. They did a point of view of this from 2001, and unfortunately, it burned down in 2001. So that's a real bummer, but very interesting ride, interesting layout. Shame it isn't there anymore. I'm not sure what's in its place now. I'd imagine maybe Black Mama, maybe, because that was 2006. I don't know. All right, moving on. We've got Alpenblitz. There's only one of these still operating. It's in India. It's pictured on the right there. But there's been a bunch of these, and they only operate for a little while, and then they just go traveling, and then eventually either get what's the word I'm looking for? Get screwed up so that they can't work, or they just close, which is unfortunate, and they get scrapped. So, but Fantasialand has had one, which is actually in the same facade as Geberg's Bahn. Also, there's obviously Alpenblitz at Babylon Land and Great Adventure, which both only operated for 2 years. So that's kind of the thing. Way back when, it was very common to just open a coaster and close it immediately because these coasters are so they're meant to be traveling coasters, really. So anyway, moving on, we've got a great custom coaster, which is still very custom. Revolution at Six Flags Magic Mountain, the terrain coaster, first coaster to feature a vertical loop. You go, Schwarzkopf. You go for making a vertical loop coaster. You're so cool, and they did it, and it's still a very cool ride. Although I did not ride it when I was at Magic Mountain because I'm a loser, because I didn't have enough time in the park. And it wasn't really that high on my bucket list. I wanted to ride all the rides that I knew would make my top 10, and I accomplished that pretty well. Aside from maybe, I don't think Superman was going to make it. So, yeah. So anyway, Revolution, very cool terrain, custom looping coaster. It does a lot of little lift hills and a lot of straight sections, but still very cool ride. Good thing it's got the lap bars now. The VR is sometimes on, sometimes off. Probably better when it's off. Anyway, moving on. We got the weight drop shuttle loops. There's a lot of information here. We've got King Cobra. Caves of Indian was the first one to open. Actually, 2 more opened in that same year, but King Cobra was the first one. And of course, it was the first real launch coaster, and it was so cool. The weight drop launch, everybody was like, "Whoa, dude!" And it's still operating today as Catapult over in Hoppy Hari. It's got kind of a Superman theme going. I'm pretty sure it's blue and red now. There's also White Lightning at Carowinds, another weight drop. These are all weight drop. I shouldn't even be mentioning that. But it's now at Gold Reef City as Golden Loop. It's that it's the mustard yellow shuttle loop. So that's pretty cool. The same park as Anaconda, that awesome invert that looks just awesomely awesome. And unfortunately, one closed, and it was moved. The one at Great America, Grease Lightning, was used as spare parts for Kentucky Kingdom's Grease Lightning, which is now in a field in Texas. And I can't even see it on Google Earth, so maybe it's scrapped, which is unfortunate. But so there goes 2 shuttle loops right there. But there's some more still operating. We've got the flywheel shuttle loops, one of which is in storage at Joyland, which was put there in 2005 after Astroworld closed their Grease Lightning coaster. There's also Montezuma's Revenge, which everybody has heard of and wants to be mentioned. It's at Knott's Berry Farm. Everybody knows about it. It's green. It's cool. It's intense, like all these other loopers, because the loops are awesome and intense. There's also one in Japan, the shuttle loop Yokohama Dreamland. Sorry, interesting stuff. I couldn't find any images of that one. That's the same park I don't know. It's not the same park as Cosmo World with the like dive coaster advantage goes under the water. Probably in the same area. Then Kennywood opened one in 1980. Laser Loop only opened for 10 years, and then 4 years later it opened at the good old Schwarzkopf Heaven, La Feria, Chapultepec, Mexico, as Cascabel, and that's still operating today. It's got that purple and green color scheme. Nagashima Spyland in Japan has one that's still operating. It's called the most boring thing of Shuttle Loop. It's yellow. That's about all I can say about it. And also in Japan, they had one called the same name, Shuttle Loop, at Tashimayan, which is still operating today. Interesting park. Check it out on RCDB. I can't think of what else they have. First, they have a jet coaster. That's all I can think of. And now that's actually moving over to a new park opening this year in the Netherlands, in Rotterdam. So very cool stuff. And then there's also the one that's kind of enclosed is Psyche Underground, or is it Psyche? I don't know. Psyche Underground at Walibi, Belgium. Very interesting. It wasn't enclosed at first, but then it was enclosed after a few years. Interesting history there. Moving on, we're talking next about Mindbender. It's Six Flags over Georgia, the first triple looping terrain coaster, although it's 2 loops. But the park loves to say triple looping because that is really, really cool, and it was the first one to have 3 loops. But it's really only 2 loops because that sort of element that you see on the bottom, the one that the train's entering right now, like it looks like an incline loop, but you're nowhere near inverted. Like you can see, it's very, very like almost straight. The track is almost parallel to the ground at the very top of that, so there's no way you're inverting. But anyway, enough about the triple looping thing. It has 2 very solid, very intense, probably some of the most intense Schwarzkopf loops around. Those small, like barely even clothoid loops, almost a perfect circle to the point where you're just pulling like over 5 Gs on every loop. So that is awesome. And obviously, it's a great terrain coaster. It's got some really nice pops when you pop up into the into some of those turns and hills there. You can see you can get some solid ejector airtime, I hear. So that's cool. Moving on, it is Shockwave at Six Flags River, Texas. Another green, not really much of a terrain coaster, but a very cool ride nonetheless. Kind of a shorter ride. You can see the entire layout there on the top. It's got the 2 loops, and then it just does some turny turns. Has a little bit of airtime. But I wouldn't say it's as good, but maybe it's even better because it pulls 5.8 Gs on the double vertical loop, which is really, really impressive for a coaster this old. That's like borderline too intense, like blackout intense, but very cool. Can't wait to ride this one someday. Same for Mindbender over Georgia, probably more so for Mindbender. But moving on, we got the Looping Star clones. First one opened at Slaharan. That's right, the park with Gold Rush today. That was called Thunder Loop, and actually Gold Rush replaced the Thunder Loop. And Thunder Loop, I'm pretty sure, is up for sale now, if I'm not mistaken. Bobby on Land over in Germany, I think, right? I'm pretty sure I'm right. Or is it Belgium? It's Belgium. Pretty sure it's Belgium. I'm pretty good at Europe. Yeah, so Looping Star, they had one there. Don't think it's still operating. I'm not 100%. Maybe it's traveling. There's also Leesburg's Lupin at, of course, Leesburg. Open for 15 years, and now it's in Brazil, which is super rad. Six Flags St. Louis actually had one. They moved that to Astroworld when they didn't have enough Schwarzkopfs, even though they had like 4 at once at one point, I'm pretty sure. So that's cool, and it was called Viper, the overused Six Flags name. And then, let's see, there's also Looping Star at Dreamland, which is now Gwazi. Of course, yes, Gwazi, the old Busch Gardens Tampa wooden coaster, but no, that's the Gwazi. In Botswana, Lion Park Resort. It's like literally in the middle of nowhere. It's a freaking grassland, savannah type place. Like the parking lot is dirt, like very, very dirt. Very interesting. You can see an orange Schwarzkopf in the back of the park, and there's like nothing else in the park either. It's very, very strange. The park's in the middle of nowhere. You can actually check it out on Google or Street View. Yeah, I've been there in Street View. If you played my GeoGuessr, you may have spawned there at one point. There's also one at the Texas State Fair for a year, and that was moved around everywhere. Moved to Jolly Roger, and then today it's still there. Pictured there is Silver Bullet at Frontier City. So very cool stuff. And the last one that hasn't moved at all, thank goodness, is the Looping Star at Nagashima Spyland, which opened in 1982, same year as their shuttle loop. That must have been a great year for that park, man. And just talking about the rides, of course, the vertical loop is nice and intense. It's a much shorter ride than the Mindbender and Shockwave and Revolution that I previously named because it's so compact. You can kind of see a lot of the layout there. Really, it's just the loop and a few helixes. Silver Bullet has that tunnel, but it's really a 30-second ride. Not a whole lot, but still very intense. Some solid rides. Moving on, we've got the catapult models, which you might not even know exist. Really, the entire ride is just a circular bird's eye view of a layout with a nice vertical loop. And I'm going to not talk about any of these except for Death Train at Maraland, because that's an awesome name. Unfortunately, it's standing but not operating, and it's also in Oman, of all places, the country Oman. Oman is the way it's spelled, right next to the UAE, so interesting geography facts there for you. Death Train, gotta love it. All right, moving on. Very cool rides. We've got Nessie's Super Roller Coaster at Hansa Park, which is a pretty interesting ride because its layout is so boring and basic that I can't believe it's that basic. It's really just a vertical loop, a really slow sweeping turn, and then a hill that might give airtime into a forceless helix into the brake run. So that's unfortunate, but still a cool ride, very weird ride. And that other coaster, I think it's like, I can't remember right now, but still a cool ride. Very cool, very cool. How many times have I said that? Keep count if you can. All right, next up, Silver Arrows. The first one to open was Scorpion at Busch Gardens Tampa, which you've all probably heard of. It has the exact same color scheme as Sheikah right next to it. Not really. Sheikah is a lot more red, but still, the blue and orange coaster there is Scorpion. Kind of a lot like a looping star, except it's got a little bit shorter of a layout, and the helixes aren't as intense, I don't think. Still very cool rides. Of course, how many times have I said that, too? There's also one that opened last year in the only park in Croatia. It's called Big Blue now at Fun Park in Vrnavec, so that's cool. That is the blue and white one on the bottom right. There's also another looping star, or, well, not a looping star, but it was called looping star because they didn't know what model it was. It's, of course, a Silver Arrow in Africa. That's right, Rand Show is in South Africa, I want to say. I'm pretty sure it's South Africa. So that is very cool. Moving on. We've got Colossus, which you probably have no idea what Colossus is. That's because it opened there. It was operating there in Brazil, Sao Paulo, for 5 years as Colossus. But it was moved to Laser, which is what you all know it as, at Dorney Park, which closed in 2008. I know Skylar was talking on Lift Hill, has ridden that. You can see him in TSAC with Canada Coaster Fan, so check out his channel. He's also on Instagram at Skylar is stuck on a Lift Hill. But that moved in 2009 to German Fairs, which is pictured on the bottom right, as Test Track, which is really what it is, but the way they spell it is weird and crazy in English. Moving on. Oasis Express. This is a coaster I don't know anything about. There's no point of use of it, and I'm very, very confused. The park is currently attending but not operating. They have a B&M Invert Batman clone, the orange one that you barely ever get to see. Very interesting park, very interesting ride. I don't know what's going on here, but it is a custom ride, as you can see from this picture. Also weird supports. It's just such a weird. I don't even know what's going on here, but it's still a very cool ride. How many times have I said that? How many times have I said that? All right. Double loop at Portopia Land closed in 2006. Unfortunately, they had two Schwarzkopfs to their name. The first one was double loop, which obviously had a double loop. After that, the ride didn't really do a whole lot. There's no point of use of it, but there is a bird's eye view image of it. Pretty sure Google Earth you can check out the historic view. It just did some forceless turns and then made its way back to the station. But the double loop looked really solidly intense. Very cool rides. Moving on, Wiener Looping at Wiener Prater opened in 1982. Only operated there for a year, but then it was moved to Boardwalk and Baseball, which I'm pretty sure is in Florida somewhere. Which it's had a lot of really cool coasters over there. A lot of like shuttle coasters and stuff like that. Very interesting park. I don't know what's going on there. I know that they had an Aero shuttle loop, which was in my my best coaster of the year place. Anyway, in my last video. Anyway, this is Wiener Looping, and it's still operating today as Bullet at Selva Magica. So cool stuff. Moving on, Muckner. So this is actually a clone that was meant to be cloned, but it was never cloned, which is unfortunate. But basically, it was moved around a few times and moved to Future World in Thailand. It was never set up, and nothing has been heard of it ever again. So rip Muckner. There's not a whole lot you can to get from this ride. I don't really see anything. But yeah, interesting stuff. That there was a model that was never cloned, but it was still a model that was meant to be cloned, and then closed after 10 years of operation. So Here's another coaster you guys have heard of, Colossus the Fire Dragon at Lagoon. So cool stuff. You can see Wicker in the background, and that's definitely Lagoon. Double loop coaster there. It's actually very, very similar to Laser at Dorney Park, except there's some kind of additional trackway curve that RCDB like says that it's not a clone of it. So that's strange and interesting. But yeah, another very short ride. It's very similar to the Looping Stars and Silver Arrows, just with two loops, so the whole layout's a bit more drawn out and weird. But yeah, very cool stuff, very intense loops, as always. Moving on is the Jumbo 5 model, which is only one coaster has been made of this, and you can really see a lot of the coaster. It's basically just a smaller version of a Jetstar 2 without the spiral lift hill. Some intense turns in there, interesting trains. Pretty newer, much newer Schwarzkopf model. Opened in 1983, so that's pretty cool. And still operating today at Pleasurewood Hills as Cannonball Express, which is the coaster pictures. The coaster is pictured here, so cool stuff. Moving on is Aconcagua at Parque de la Ciudad in Buenos Aires, Argentina, which unfortunately was torn down. The park is actually still operating, I'm pretty sure, but like none of the coasters, they couldn't afford to operate any of the coasters. This is the same park as Vertigo Rama, which is like this massive Intamin racing coaster. It's similar to like a Gemini, except it's all steel and it's Intamin. And it's very, very strange. It uses like PTC trains or something very similar to it. I'm very confused by it, but it's very cool. You can check out like a fake point of view of it. Somebody did a L2 of it. There's a bunch of pictures of it on RCDB as well when somebody visited the park. So that's pretty cool. Moving on. Dryer looping, which is now known as Quimera at La Feria Chapultepec. Holy cow, this thing looks insane. There's some just insanely rapid turns. They don't use any of the brakes that you're supposed to, so you just go flying through this ride. You can gray out so easily, maybe even black out. You get like 5+ Gs. This is one of the best, most intense Schwarzkopfs around. Maybe the best, maybe not. I don't know. Just insanity for sure. Check out a point of view. Check out people getting thrown around on this thing, because you get thrown around. It's very similar. It's similar to most of the Schwarzkopfs where it's only a lap bar, so you just go crazy, man. You go flying around. I hear you get bruised, but I don't care if you get bruised because this ride looks so intense and so awesome, and I love it. Moving on is Mindbender at Galaxy Land, similar to Quimera, except it's even more brutal because of the terrible accordion type restraints over the shoulders. So that's kind of a bummer, but still a triple looping coaster, some intense helixes, intense loops, awesome stuff. Get thrown around. And obviously, there was that one accident in 1980 something where one train came off, so that's why they added all those crazy restraints and crazy operating procedures. Moving on is Thriller, which is pretty sure it opened first at Gronelund in '96, which you can all read here. But it was probably most known for this picture here at Six Flags Astroworld. It was called Texas Tornado, or maybe Taz's Texas Tornado. For 3 years, I know Sean Flaherty's ridden this, and it was a weird ride, man. Very strangely intense. The loops, like I've never seen a loop quite like it. But you just loop, and then you do a same loop with the same in the same area as the last one. Like that must be so stupidly intense. I can't even picture it. And then it moved to Six Flags Discovery Kingdom in the Oakland area, and operated there for 2 years, and stood there for a few years, and then it was moved to some Mexican park. And apparently, I think I read somewhere that this was like 6+ Gs, so that can kind of give you an idea. Very, very interesting stuff here. Also, that fourth loop there, that smaller red one, that's just so weird looking. All these loops are so weird. I can't even. This ride is just so weird, but so cool at the same time, and it's a shame if it's scrapped for good. Moving on is BMRX, which is also at Kobe Protopia Land, the same park as Double Loop. So it's basically, you guys know about Nightmare at Camelot theme park. This is the same thing, except, well, like when it first operated, it was in Japan and had all this theming around it, which looks really, really interesting. I know Sean Flaherty's ridden this in like its second to last year of operation in this park. So that's cool, but unfortunately, it's standing but not operating today. You check it out, the abandoned theme park, and check out the old coaster. Very cool stuff. And actually, this is when Schwarzkopf moved to work with Zier, which is interesting, or Zaire, or however the hell you pronounce that thing. Moving on, Leesburg Bond in the same boat as the last one, where Zier kind of helped out because I think Zier bought some of Schwarzkopf, or maybe they just merged or something. This is a massively long train coaster, but it's still very much so a family coaster. does a really interesting sort of circular layout a whole bunch of times. Obviously, it's at Leesburg, so that's awesome. Goes very close to Helix now that's open, and just a very cool looking ride. So count the cools in this video. If you did correctly, I don't want to count myself, but if you did correctly, props to you. You get a pin in the comments and a heart and whatever else you get. I don't know. Join the Discord and maybe I'll call you sometime. See you later, guys. Just kidding. There's some Togos that's coming up next, so I have to make that video now. That's fun. But you guys are going to vote for one of those 4 coaster lists that I'm going to do next, so that's fun. Now I will see you guys later. Goodbye.